Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we bring you day 276 of Russian invasion into Ukraine, with Olexiy Arestovych, advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel, and Mark Feygin, Russian opposition politician. In this stream, they discuss Putin's lack of success in Ugledar and continuous attempts to break the front near Bakhmut, his fake meeting with so-called mothers of Russian killed or mobilized, and whether it can be a preparation for the next wave of mobilization, intercepts of Russian military on the front, and Alexei's meeting with some of the anti-Putin opposition in Europe, consequences of Belarus Minister of Foreign Affairs' death, and new variations of the goal of special operation from the speech of Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov. Negotiations about the price of Russian defeat is ongoing, waiting for similar negotiations about full Russian capitulation and leaving Crimea. Enjoy. Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feigin Live. It is Saturday, November 26th. Time is 2 minutes past 10 in Kiev and 2 minutes past 11 in Moscow. And we are doing another stream, day 276, with Olexiy Arestovich. Good evening, Olexiy. Almost 100,000 watching us live, about 20,000 clicked the like button. The usual, as we're trying to overcome the aftermath of missile strikes on Ukraine, since most people do not have access to internet in different parts of Ukraine. If you share that stream on your social media, that would help them to see us, even though a bit later, not joining live, but still that helps people to make sure they see us, they see the information. And do not forget to subscribe to Feigin Live, to Olexiy Arestovich, and to the Privateer Station if you are watching or listening that in English. And let's start discussing the events. We missed a day yesterday, so we probably have a bit more, and let's go over the last 48 hours. Tell us what's happening on the front. Let's bring up the map. Let's start with Kherson. Yeah, we are showing Kherson. I don't know if you see that. I don't see that, so just tell me what you're showing. We're showing the right and left banks. There are already 17 casualties of Russian shellings of Kherson. And I need to remind that from the standpoint of view of Russian military, that city belongs to Russia. So they are killing Russian citizens. But when did it ever stop them? We are shooting at them too. There are artillery duels happening on both banks. And since we do have HIMARS, we make them pay a much higher toll than they impose on us. But one needs to understand that until they're pushed further out by several dozen kilometers away from the river, the shellings of the city will continue, and it's up to the citizens to figure out, do they want to stay in that area or do they want to move out. And also I need to appeal to Kherson citizens to not ignore the warnings and to please go to shelters, because if you avoid that, otherwise you are becoming the statistics and casualties. In Kharkov, for example, they already figured this out, and I cannot remember 17 casualties in one day there. People there already know how to behave. Here it's a new phase for Kherson, so I understand also people not willing to go to spend the night in the shelter in winter. But if there are any ways for you to hide, please take care. There is also a risk that there is no air warning. It's very difficult to provide air warning because very often Russians use field artillery, and field artillery is basically just 30 seconds between the shot and the hit. So if you can find ways to protect yourselves, dear citizens of Kherson, please do so. And this is more, I understand it may be difficult, so it's more of my advice in general than a practical recommendation. There is still ongoing fighting near Ugledar. Russian troops are trying to fulfill their goals there, but they're failing. And let's put it delicately, some actions of Ukrainian military and Ukrainian artillery have delayed and probably cancelled the probability of capturing Vuhledar for Russians. Let's just be careful here, but I think they're not going anywhere. And then here they continue on the Eastern Front. They do continue to push to the west from Gorlovka. They're trying to break the front, and I understand they want to cut the road between Avdiivka and Konstantinovka. You can see that red protrusion at about 6 o'clock on this map, with the two arrows sticking out from it and some gray area to the road, the orange road to the left of it. So that's where they're trying to capture the road. So the main point of their attack is Zryanovka. It is a pretty difficult situation there because they are, as usual, trying to oversaturate a small area with the artillery, and our troops are fighting back. So here's Zryanovka on the map, and then if we go higher, Bakhmut, Solidar, similar picture that we've seen for a while, several attempts to go into offensive every day, and layers upon layers of killed Russian troops. Now, if we go higher to Svatova, the initiative here belongs to the Ukrainian side. It's still somewhat tactical, but they are trying to do some counteroffensive measures, and it's very tactical though, without much success for them to counter us, so we're controlling that area. And they continue attacking our other cities in Nikopol, in Kharkov region, and Zaporozhye. They shell everything they can reach, and periodically continue with missile strikes. So okay, got it. Let's continue with other news that are either a continuation of other earlier events, or perhaps we'll have more continuation later. First of them is the meeting of Putin, fake, of course, with so-called mothers of mobilized or dead Russian troops. There was some guy who supposedly died in 2019 with the last name Shenichkin, and his supposedly mother was present at this meeting. And we have no details as to who these women were, maybe relatives or vetted friends of Putin's security detail. There were a lot of videos about women who actually did want to meet Putin, but the last time they invited somebody who were real mothers of that was a few years ago, and he did not like what they had to say, and many of them had some pressure and blowback after that meeting. So on this meeting it sounded, and he made a weird statement that if they would not be mobilized, they could have died. Children of these mothers, they could have died from vodka, from automobile accident. So now they're fulfilling some higher purpose. Now let me ask you this. Perhaps from the intercepts, perhaps from the military conversations, what are the moods on the front? How are these mobilized taking that position of their leader? They've been on the front for about 2 months already, and probably the person on the front who's been in the puddle of dirt and mud somewhere near Bakhmut, do they change their stance on the whole war? Well, that video was very heavily post-produced, right, with effects and stuff. Oh yeah, we see the artifacts. So it appears that he doesn't feel the need to explain his actions in front of Russian public. One thing, I think it was Speer, Minister of Industries of Third Reich. He was surprised during the whole war how much worse can the leaders of democratic countries allow themselves to treat their people. Call upon the third or fourth shift at the factory, send people to accept unpopular measures, make them donate gold, make them mobilize. Speer was commenting that Hitler or Stalin could not afford even a tenth of these measures in their countries. And he was mostly concentrating, though, on Germany in his comments, and we should remind that German factories switched to the second shift only in 1944 and introduced the third shift only in March of 45, a few months before the war was over. So that's the so-called economic dilemma of guns and food. And this is one of the myths, that everything is happening because the leader orders in the authoritarian regimes. But dictators, in turn, very heavily are dependent upon the moods of their populace. That's why Putin continues and does need these fake meetings with fake stewardesses or fake mothers of soldiers or fake somebodies to continue producing this image. And they had, remember, the big streams about answering questions of just simple citizens of Russia, those hours-long so-called direct casts with people who were had vetted questions. So, in order to be an authoritarian leader, you somehow need to lead these people. And this is how propaganda works. So, if dictator works, if dictator wants something, wants to achieve something, propaganda is used to create that mood or incite that mood with the public, and then the dictator, as if responding to that, takes that decision. So, the fact that he is doing that or orchestrating that meeting with parents of mobilized, it means that signals of people's upset with mobilization have reached a degree that is impossible to ignore anymore. And here is the top leader going out to people, trying to calm them down. If the signals were smaller, they would have dropped it onto the Ministry of Defense, just like Peskov likes to say, oh, let's talk to military, it's not my question. So it means that the matter is urgent, and also probably there is a risk that there is a new wave of mobilization, so they need to show that everything is all right. I have another question in this regard. That son that they talked about, who died in 2019, where did he die? Because according to Russian mythology, this war started only in February of 2022. And until then, there were troops of so-called Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics fighting, and Russia came only in February of this year to show how it should be done proper. So where did he die in 2019? Oh, they did not indicate that. They only cared about here is mom, here is the son, and that's all they cared. Well, yeah, but we do have a question. Where did he die, and what did Russian cadre military do on the territory of Ukraine? How much their propaganda had to fail in order to slip that 2019 date? How did they manage to not address the fact that Russian army, according to their own statements, only joined war effort in February of 2022 and got their asses handed to them, but still, how did that occur? Why did he die? Where did he die in 2019? Yeah, I actually suspect they they were filming these moms and Putin separately. So there was a lot of heavy editing involved. And regardless, Mark, I think they had to address certain things. I think he had to address the screaming questions that are getting the status of trends or threatening trends in the society. Presidents usually do not react to smaller things. It's either a threatening trend in the society or a trend that needs to be supported. So creating a new trend, essentially. So just like our president did, we are noticing that somber date of Holodomor that hunger event on the early 20th century induced by communist rule. And our president came out and started the initiative of preventing hunger in other parts of the world as the country who suffered from it back in the day. So that's what president can also do. He can start a new trend. So this is a thing there. This is an angle to look at this event of Putin's meeting with mothers. So it's interesting. Could be a similar trendsetter as meeting of Shoigu and Surovikin when they were giving and taking orders about leaving Kherson. So that was another trend-setting point. So yeah, I think it should be probably Kiriyenko's group writing scenarios for that. They're the ones keeping pulse and monitoring. So, do you think that also means that new wave of mobilization will likely occur? Because we do have a significant share of our viewers from Russia who think that maybe that's already over. Well, yeah, they will likely do that because after they rotate and withdraw 100,000 wounded from the front, they would need another 100,000. And you just need to understand that your uniforms will likely be taken off from the previous round, from those who died there or got wounded there. They already are dressing them up in Iranian uniform. And oh yeah, by the way, on the meeting, Putin did mention that they do have issues they need to resolve, logistic issues about the uniform, winter clothes and stuff. But it appears that this push will continue. If they want to put 300,000 dead on the front to not crumple the vision of their leader, they will likely do that as long as people allow them to. So, is there a way to measure, do you know what's the mood in the front, on the battlefront? Well, one needs to understand, on the front it's a little tricky to measure their moods, because the mood of a person who is standing knee-deep or waist-deep in the wet trench, because he doesn't know how to create the drainage system, and it's apparently an art that Russian troops are not taught. People are usually upset at different things at the trench, but they usually are upset at local immediate logistics. They can curse the president, but it's too far remote from them. I don't think they have any misunderstanding about what they're doing in Ukraine and what is that fight about, but it's not some kind of condemnation that they can share much around in the trench. And what about their cursing about Putin and any active things, any wishes to Putin? We have a ton of intercepts like that. Mark, if it was just mobilized talking about that, we hear that from the mouths of colonels and their leaders. That's the way that's what they're discussing. Mobilized are the last thing to look in. It's actually high FSB ranking officers already cursing Putin 7 ways to Sunday, so... So, in reality, I think about 80% of Russian citizens who support Putin in some capacity, probably half of them kind of support the operation that he is doing, but the rest are still of an opinion that since we started, we need to kind of continue that. Yeah, that's an old song, yeah. If we start the war, you need to stick together, yeah, unfortunately. And I actually met with several of Russian citizens, or ex-Russian citizens. I was in Europe visiting some NATO things, so I met some opposition and some people who sincerely hate Putin from the Russian opposition. They do not fully believe about Bucha and Kherson and Izium and these places where the atrocities took place. They're coming back and saying it's hard to believe. We are adults. We are objective adults. So it's difficult to believe things like that happening. And, it's interesting. People who want to be moderate in this regard, they often invoke, let's somberly review the facts. They talk about logic and somberness in realizing and analyzing the signals from Bucha and other places. So for those somberly analyzing, I want to tell, I don't know, Olexiy, whom you met with from opposition. These are some weird opposition people. Mark, these are not public figures. They're kind of more on the acting side, business side. And they consider themselves to be very somber. So their position is that, of course, several citizens were killed in Bucha, but the rest were the corpses that Ukrainians brought around and just emphasized the damage. I don't know whom you're meeting with, Olexiy. This is weird. So, okay, this was not my initiative, Mark. These were the Russian citizens who were brought to me by foreigners, by my foreign contacts. Well, I will tell you, Olexiy, these are some dumb fucks they brought to you. Well, in any case, Mark, I'm expressing that what I saw, even those who are explicitly talking about returning of Crimea and anti-Putin position, they still are under impression that converts reality into something different. That they're kind of living in their own little information bubble. So people in Izum, by the way, they did have access to internet, right? So when we liberated Izum and we talked to people there, they did not even know anything about Bucha. So we overestimate people's awareness. We think that if they do have smartphone, they can access information, they can choose their own position. But apparently, a lot of people ignore different facts, the ones that where they don't have emotional or values attached to the news. And even though that's a very controversial part of news, a part of media, which everyone wants to use or to utilize in their favor. And that's coming back to the matter, do we produce any ripples on the media front? Trust me, we do. Because if we were not present, and other people like us would not be talking about that, would not be bringing that up and showing what's happening, the situation would have been much worse. And foreigners from our Western allies, they have access to all the information, right? And very often I run into a position that, well, they're not killing people on purpose, right? This is just excessive war. This is just summary casualties. Olexiy, you're overemphasizing these things. You're romanticizing certain elements. I have to counter that and say 93 dead bodies in Kherson police headquarters, center of the city. 93 dead people with traces of torture. Imagine how many more are to be found in villages and the outskirts. And then they retort as well, there are some overly zealous implementators on the front, but the whole Russian army, we cannot believe the whole army is the way they work. So that's what we have to work with. And that's what in the heads of Russia. They are under the propaganda influence. And I'm bringing you an example of what people living in Europe think. Very often it's such a mess in their heads too. But you can imagine what a mess it is in the heads of Russian citizens in Russia. And very often you run into that. Yeah, we condemn the war is bad, there are a lot of military crimes from the side of Russia, but it needs to be concluded because if we started, we need to conclude that. So what, otherwise Russia would lose? They would have to pay reparations. How we can live with that? So these are the people who are likely the biggest support of regime, probably the main pillar of support for Putin's regime, even more than those hooray patriots who are supporting the actual military action on the front and more visible in the media. But these are the people who are basically giving him the mandate to continue realizing this politics. And the sons of these mothers are dying out there in Bakhmut and others because since we started, we need to continue. Well, and even Russian performers out in the public. Once in a while, they will make us sleep. Like, we understand this is a shit show that we're doing there in Ukraine, but we started that. We need to continue. We need to stay together. So this is the group that in generally likes everything good but is against everything bad. In this case, they have an interesting shuffle they keep making, that everything good is their Russian right to do, Russian right to be, Russian right to do however they want to. And when you dig deeper, they end up talking about, Katechon and resisting Antichrist in the face of other nations. So that exists in the heads of a lot of pretty smart people still. So its situation is very complex. Okay, 313,000 are watching us. Over 90,000 clicked the like button. I thank you all for spending your time with us, your Saturday time with us. And please continue to share links wherever you converse, if it's Reddit, if it's other places, please, in social media, please continue sharing links to that stream. Please post link, maybe use Messenger, perhaps send it to your friends in Ukraine and in Russia. We need to keep changing that tide of misinformation and pro-Putin propaganda. We are approaching 2 million on Feygin Live, so those of you who continue watching us without subscription, please subscribe. Same request, do that for Olexiy Arestovich channel and for the privateer station as well. So we've been about 26 minutes live, and we have another interesting piece of news. We've been discussing Belarus from different angles for the last several days, and I was even asked, why are you even talking about Belarus? So all of a sudden, their Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mackey, dies in Belarus. He is a trusted person of Lukashenko, very close to him. To a big degree, their politics of Belarus, zigging and zagging in different questions, was realized by people like Mackey. So one needs to mention that probably the biggest pinnacle of his career, of his actions, was the 2015, when in exchange for release of detained people, Lukashenko was allowed to be re-elected. And he managed to meet a lot of Western authorities, was even talking to Pompeo and other people. And recently there was a lot of publications about Lukashenko, that Belarus people are tired of him, they want him to be gone. And all of a sudden, that person who was just happy and very lively a few days ago dies. We don't know. Was he... Did he have any help in his sudden demise, or was it due to natural causes? Do you think any other information... Do you have any other information? Do you have any other angle to that situation? Was he partaking in evading the pressure from Moscow, or perhaps, his death might affect their future political behavior? So, Mark, first of all, I don't think this is a warning. I don't think there is some conspiracy saying this death is a warning. No. When somebody wants to assassinate somebody, you don't warn. So I don't believe in killing anyone as a warning. If Lukashenko wanted... If somebody wanted to warn Lukashenko, Lukashenko can definitely increase his protection drastically, so he would make himself a much harder target. So people are prone to adding conspirology to different events, and life is full of different incidents that actually are pretty natural. that man could have died of his own natural causes, and then people start thinking around and adding additional meanings to the events. I know that a lot of commentators ran down this pathway, and I'm not going to. I don't think that he was murdered. I think it probably was natural causes. But what we can discuss here is possible consequences. So I think the main thing here is to observe what will be his successor. Who will they appoint as his successor? It is a very difficult situation. They are in somewhat cadre hunger in Belarus. So it needs to be somebody experienced, and we'll see who will be leading their politics on the international front. Mackay was not a simpleton. He definitely was working on different fronts. He created a bunch of loyal non-government organizations that supported his opinion. He was also trying to work with China, with Asia. Will the new player be able to maintain that level? We don't know. And he also managed to maintain a certain independence of Minister of Foreign Affairs from Lukashenko himself. So he had a certain politics flavor in his actions. He actually was representing one of the 5 groups that are existing around Lukashenko, so they were a little bit disconnected. He was leading with, they were joined on the bigger political issues, but there was definitely a separate point, a separate node in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. However, in general scheme of things, I don't think that their apparatus can change much with a death of one person, unless this is Lukashenko who died. So I don't think Belarus will change their position notably in the international arena on their stance on different things. That's, I think, my prediction on that. It would be interesting to spin this idea and analyze it from different angles if one could actually prove that he was murdered, that he was assassinated. And then the other angle would be, was it against him personally, or was it against the whole direction of Belarus politics? So it is, I would be very careful, very cautious into jumping to conclusions that, oh, the wind changed, so things are going to be very different now. Probably not. We'll see. Let's wait for more facts. If the changes will occur, of course, we'll trace them and we'll comment them. So you, in context of this information, especially after the CSTO, the Common Security Treaty Organization, that there was some news about Lukashenko being a threat to Moscow because he wasn't participating in Ukraine operation from Ukraine war from the north. Well, yeah, Lukashenko was a threat to Moscow for the last 20 years in one way or another. Belarus is an occupied territory, essentially. It should not be taken different than the part that is occupied in Kherson region or Lugansk region. And there is a very energetic Gauleiter, ruler of that, designated ruler of that territory, who usurped the title of president, who afforded for that occupation, essentially. This is not like Saldo here in Ukraine, but he has a lot of similar characteristics. And if he doesn't want to part in that war, and he really doesn't want to, and Mackay was also that key character in that too, who was zigzagging in the field and trying to avoid being involved in this war. But I don't think his death can change the position of Belarus and can put Belarus to actually participate participating in military operation. If indeed they wanted Belarus to partake in that, they would need to remove somebody from the force ministries, I don't know, defense or somebody, or security, because foreign affairs, they're not participants. They can be against the war, but they're not the active player in the actual battlefront. So Usually, these questions are addressed to the ones who are immediately responsible for military activities, so head of the state, top military leader, and then after that, the next couple tiers underneath him. And creating a certain media sources, media waves in the interwebs, can it affect Belarus' participation in this war? I don't think so. It's just ripples in the water, but they will not force Belarus to fight physically. And Lukashenko is still of that opinion. He is still not wanting to fight. With all my respect to the position of Minister of Foreign Affairs and his personal position that was pretty rational, he had no influence on the actual physical participation of Belarus in war. Okay, another topic, we hear different voices about new goals of that operation or changing goalposts. Peskov already mentioned before, we did talk about it, that Russian goal is not to replace the leadership of Ukraine. Lavrov, that fucktard, is talking that Ukraine will be liberated from Nazis, so probably from you, Olexiy, because I guess you are one of them, and will be living in peace with Slavic brothers, says Armenian national Lavrov, and he also says that any attempt to take back Crimea or any other territory occupied by Russia will fail. And he addressed that Zelensky indeed claimed that he wanted to take Crimea back, but he is probably forgetting the history of this peninsula, and he is probably from his humor days, he is maybe joking, but we understand that he will fail in taking Crimea back. So that's what he said in the recent documentary that they released in Russia. You know, Mark, Putin's environments, that was one of their strengths. They always could create a visibility of a frank conversation with Russian people, so that a Russian citizen watching a TV cannot but agree with Lavrov and Putin when they appear there. They talk not as not as ministers, not as leaders. They talk as part of the people. And that's what Putin was often referring to. Yeah, I'm from the people, right? Exactly. So they're discussing that in the tone of, people gathering together in a rec room in the office. That's the tone they keep. It's like, should we give it to them? Of course we can't give it to them. And of course, there could be different upsets on the front. We're fighting a big coalition of the West, but we cannot accept Crimea being taken away from Russia. And then people around him would be nodding and saying, yeah, you cannot do that. So, in superposition to that, there is a very dry, very logic position of the West that countries with 60% of the world GDP, in any way, however you spin it, will always prevail over the country with 1.5% GDP. And second, Ukraine is also a very emotional and rational participant of this story. I would even say a passionate participant, because today people in Ukraine also draw linkages between Golodomor of 23 and 33, 19 of the 20th century, and Holodomor, or the cold winter, killing by cold, linkage to that killing by hunger. And this is part of many years' history, many years of a certain attitude and relations between these two countries. And now that we do have Western weapons, we can actually pay back for grandma's horrors of her childhood, for an eaten grandpa, great-grandpa, or for died branches of family who had nothing to eat during that famine. And People on the deeper inner scale, many of them are also considering that as part of restoring that justice. And what we have is that two sides. We have countries with 60% GDP on one side and Ukrainian passion to finally kick back after 400 years of oppression. Do you think who will win? Who do you think will win in that situation? We already conducted several successful operations, and we just have a few more so that nobody would have any illusions. Right now is the phase when Putin and Lavrov are negotiating the price of loss. They realize that they have lost in this war. And they also have their own passionate romanticists who still cling to the idea of maybe bloody but Pyrrhic victory, of keeping Lugansk and Donetsk regions. But the others who are more somber, they already, and sober, they're already talking about next step, about giving up some territories. And after that is gone, after that step is passed, after they try to use more of their troops, the ones that they fitted with mobilized people and Iranian weapons, by February, March, they'll be gone. These mobilized waves will be gone. I don't know what else can their system do and where else can they find more resources to radically change that situation. And during that time, the situation will continue declining economically, politically. Oil sanctions are already producing results. For the last couple months, they've been coming. Sorry, the embargo is just coming. So then they'll have to face their capitulation instead of just a defeat. And then there'll be a fork in the road. The funnel will be the funnel of catastrophes will be shrinking, and then there'll be a question of capitulation, let's say in Crimea, because for those who perhaps haven't heard us earlier, the approach of Ukrainian troops to Crimea will mean that the Crimean bridge will be destroyed in its cargo capacity, and then they'll have to ferry supplies by boat, by ship. But we can still reach both ships and airplanes, because our weapons at the mouth of Crimea can reach any of that equipment. And we have HARMs, HIMARS, Brimstones, and other weapons that can reach Russian support. So Ukrainian infantry will only have to wait till we work on Crimea and then just walk in, because Crimea is a trap, basically. It actually is a worse trap than the right bank of Dnieper, right? Crimea is good when you have strong communications and overwhelming advantage. That's what they used for the breakthrough in the south. That's where they got to the operative field and reached Kherson. But if you are on the other side, you're trapped. I need to remind our viewers that during the whole history of Crimea, it was never successfully defended. Germans took it without any tank detachment, just with infantry, when the Soviet Union had a bunch of tanks and artillery units there. So that could be a grand finale of that side of the war, and just keep an eye on the officials of the FSB and the regional officials. When they will start evacuation, that'll be your sign. So their position in Russia, peddling the idea that they'll never give Crimea up, that's a big mistake. That's a wrong stance to take. I remind our viewers that, remember, United States, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, huge army that had to withdraw from different territories of the world. And this is a real superpower, much stronger in military capacity and economic capacity than Russia. Well, they didn't really retreat, right? They withdrew. Yeah, they withdrew their troops, and there were different reasons for that. But indeed, they had to lose. They had to withdraw and leave their territories. And remember the Korean War, they could have used nukes there, and Soviet Union would not be able to retaliate much, and American politicians looked at McNamara when he suggested that, said, no, we're not doing that. So at some point they had to do the peace treaty, and yeah, they keep some presence there, but in general they abandoned the idea of retaking the whole peninsula. So I think Lavrov is making these statements and the videos that Crimea is going to be Russian forever is not from a good life. Remember, he did not want to visit Crimea. He evaded being there at the next territory. But eventually, when Putin's regime made him go there, that's when he made his famous slip, fucking idiots, on a hot mic. So, after this situation with Crimea, when the Crimea is taken back, I think Russians will ask of him. And they will ask him, so what did you say there? Why were you talking to us? Why were you giving these fake promises? And when Russia will start looking inwards, there'll be a lot of infighting happening. And there'll be a lot of very strong infighting happening. You know who'll be the happiest? The General Beseda will be happiest one. He'll probably be thinking, I'm so glad that I'm already in prison. It's quiet and there is food and it's all right here, because outside the 1993 will seem to Putin's team as a nice year. Yeah, I think Beseda will be reached too, but, well, yeah, he probably will be the last one to fail. You know, they could probably grab him from KGB Lefortovo to Matroskaya Tishina, to the big room of 20, for people to have fun with that security general. You know who might survive longer? Surovikin might survive longer, unless Putin will execute him before. Because at least he talked about making difficult decisions and making them. He was withdrawing. He might be understood and forgiven. But those others who were sending blooded sledgehammers to European Parliament, yeah, and Russian rebellion is a very bloody thing. You know, they might convert sledgehammer into a broomstick. Oh yeah, knowing how Russian people revolt, they can probably do that. Yeah, they can. That's what I'm suggesting. They probably don't know any other way. It's pretty bad. 350,000 are watching us, and over 125 click the like button. We've been about 47 minutes live. Are you coming up tomorrow? Questionable? I don't know. I will tell you after lunch. Okay. Probably yes, but I cannot promise it yet. Okay, I understand your schedule is broken with all the traveling. Okay, we'll talk about that. Once again, I do address our viewers. Instead of the usual 400,000, 500,000 watching us live, it's only about 300,000 watching us live. Those who haven't watched the stream, they do watch us later. I don't know, perhaps for the internet or the light or electricity issues, but if they're not subscribed and they have not seen an update in their YouTube, it's more difficult for them to find it. So that's why I'm asking, please continue sharing links in your social media with your friends. Do not forget to subscribe to Olexiy, to my channel, and to the privateer station. Thank you, everybody. And I hope to maybe see you tomorrow, right? Okay, see you tomorrow. Thank you, goodbye.